Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udirayet Nashta Praeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nestiki. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Today we are beginning a new canto. Oh, no, sorry, my bad. Oh, we are actually. Yes, we are beginning Canto 5, Srimad Bhagavatam. Very interesting canto, very adventurous canto, a lot of information in this canto. So before this, we ended Canto 4, where Narad Muni concludes his teachings to the Prachetas, or the sons of Maharaj Prachinha Barishad. So just wanted a quick recall, if anyone remembers any concluding last final teachings that Narad Muni imparted to the Prachetas before concluding the fourth canto. Any points, anything that Yes, that was one of the verses. By watering the root of the tree, all the branches and fruits and flowers are nourished. And so by satisfying Krishna, all the demigods and all the other personalities are naturally satisfied. So Narad Muni, his conclusion, like we see any conclusion in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, it ends in devotional service, it ends in the essence. And so similarly, Narad Muni's teachings ends in bhakti. He says that couple of the important things he says is that transcendental practices that do not ultimately help one realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead are useless. Because the Prachetas, as we remember, were performing so many austerities underwater for 10,000 years and so on. And so Narad Muni wants to bring their attention to the essence that whatever austerities, whatever activities you're performing, he says, ultimately, that do not ultimately help one realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead are useless, those activities. Be they mystic yoga practices, the analytical study of matter, severe austerity, the acceptance of sannyas, or the study of Vedic literature. All these may be very important aspects. All these may be very important aspects of spiritual advancement, but unless one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, all these processes are useless. And then he says, by showing mercy to all living entities, being satisfied somehow or other, and restricting the senses from sense enjoyment, one can very quickly satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Janardana. So this was the conclusion of Narada's teachings. And here Shukdev Goswami also concludes the description of the descendants of King Uttanapad. So far, all this Prachina Barhishat and Puranjana and Prachetas was a description of the descendants of one king, which is King Uttanapad, who is the son of Swayambhuva Manu, who is the son of Brahma. And then there is another son of Swayambhuva Manu, who is Priyavrata. And so the fifth canto is basically the description of the descendants of Priyavrata, his life story. So we will begin with verse number 1. We will read verses 1 to 9, but then we will also comment after each verse. So verse number 1 translation. We can go around probably.
King Parikshit inquired from Shukadev Goswami, O great sage, why did King Priyavrata, who was a great self-realized devotee of the Lord, remain in household life, which is the root cause, the bondage of karma, fruit of activities, and which defeats the mission of human life?
Om Ajnanati Mirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Saktikam. So this here now we see Shukdev Goswami concluded the previous chapter by saying, now moving on to King Priyavrata, and then he said that King Priyavrata, although very advanced in knowledge and although he was a pure devotee of Krishna, he still entered household life. He got married, he had a family, and he had a kingdom. He became a king. And so Parikshit Maharaj is so surprised at this, and he's questioning very rightly. He said, O great sage, why did Priyavrata, who was a great self-realized devotee of the Lord, remain in household life, which is the root cause of bondage of karma and which defeats the mission of human life? Because generally, if we see around us, becoming or attachment to household life is extremely powerful in one's life. So this attachment to family in the life of a normal materialistic person is so powerful that their life becomes centered around the satisfaction of the family. And they can hardly even consider any spiritual topics, or are hardly even worried about their spiritual interests. Family takes the center stage in their life. And so Parikshit Maharaj is very concerned. He's saying, how can Priyavrata, being so detached and such a pure devotee, how can he enter or remain in household life? So in purport, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport of verse 1, he says, one may argue, why is it wrong to enjoy household life? What is the problem? Is anyone, any comments on what can be the problem? Why is it wrong to enjoy household life? Isn't it normal having a spouse and kids? Yes. Attachment. Attachment. Can you elaborate, maybe?
You become attached to them and kind of put Krishna to the side. They become forefront in your lives.
Mm-hmm. Attachment.
Serving them. You serve them instead of serving Krishna. It's hard to remember to serve them as devotees of Krishna. From my experience.
Yes, rightly said. Did you have some?
we can fall into easily to the perception of I and mine. This is my family.
Aham
This is-
mameti. Yes.
So I have this family. This is mine. I'm the controller. I'm the enjoyer. And so this can become a very easy attachment in householder
Mm.
life.
Yes, family life can expand this consciousness of I and mine. My wife, my husband, my kids, my house, my money, my wealth, my dog. It expands this consciousness of me and mine. So Prabhupada answers this also in the purport. Why is it wrong to enjoy household life? The reply is that in household life, one becomes bound by the results of fruitive activities. The essence of household life is sense enjoyment. And as long as one engrosses his mind in working hard for sense enjoyment, one becomes bound by the reactions of fruitive activities. The ignorance of self-realization is the greatest defeat in human life. I'll repeat. The ignorance of self-realization is the greatest defeat in human life. The human form of life is especially meant for getting out of the bondage of fruitive activities. But as long as one is forgetful of his life's mission and acts like an ordinary animal, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, he must continue his conditioned life of material existence. Such a life is called Swarupa Vismriti, forgetfulness of one's real constitutional position. We already are in a very challenging situation because this body itself is Swarup Vismriti. We have a Swarup, a form in the spiritual world, and because of this body, we have already forgotten our form in the spiritual world. And then adding to that bodily conception, expanding on that bodily conception in the form of family life. And then that's even further degradation in the deep dark well, as Prahlad Maharaj says, Grihanda Kopam. So Prabhupada is very specific here. He says the essence of household life is sense enjoyment. And that is why it becomes a problem. So it is not household life in itself that is a problem. But if the essence is sense enjoyment, then it is a problem. And we will expand on that later. We will see over the next few days when we reach those verses that's how Priyavrata actually remained liberal even in family life. So next verse.
Devotees are certainly liberated persons. Therefore, O greatest of the Brahmanas, they cannot possibly be absorbed in family affairs.
Elevated Mahatmas, who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are fully satiated by the shade of those lotus feet. Their consciousness cannot possibly become attached to family members.
So Maharaj Parikshit continues to express his shock and his wonder and his surprise that how can this be possible? Mahatmas who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord are fully satiated. Their consciousness cannot possibly become attached to family members. Then how was Priyavrata attached to his family so much? How did this happen? Why did this happen? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says of this third verse, the distinction between family life and spiritual life can be experienced by any person who has undergone the tribulations of living with a family. One who comes under the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord never becomes attracted by the activities of family life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishtva Nivarthate, one gives up lower engagements when he experiences a higher taste. Thus one becomes detached from family life as soon as he comes under the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. The principle here is not that Priyavrata entered family life and so it is surprising. Not because the act of entering family life itself is not surprising. What's surprising for Parikshit Maharaj is that Priyavrata was a pure devotee. He had a higher taste in life. And so how could he settle for a lower taste of family life? Why did he step down? What could be the cause? And in a couple of verses, Shukdev Goswami will address that. What caused this? Verse number 4.
The king continued, O great Brahmana, this is my great doubt. How was it possible for a person like King Priyavrata, who was so attached to wife, children, and home, to achieve the topmost infallible perfection in Krishna consciousness?
4 verses, and Parikshit Maharaj is still in shock. We will expand on verse 5. It's prose, so we will not read the Sanskrit, but we will do synonyms, word by word.
Sri Shuka.
5, yes. We will do synonyms because it's prose, so we will not sing the Sanskrit. Yes. So we can do this together. The synonyms. Sri Shuka Uvacha. Together. Sri Shuka Uvacha. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, Badham, correct. Uktam, what you have said. Bhagavata, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Uttama Shlokasya, who is praised with excellent verses. Srimad Charana Aravinda, of the feet which are just like the most beautiful fragrant lotus flowers. Makaranda, honey. Rase, in the nectar. Of Aveshita, absorbed. Chaitasaha, whose hearts. Bhagavataha, to the devotees. Paramhamsa, liberated persons. Daita, pleasing. Katham, glorification. Kinchit, sometimes. Antaraya, by impediments. Vihatam, checked. Swam, Om. Shivatamam, most exalted. Padavim, position. Na, do not. Prayena, almost always. Hinvanti, give up. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, we can do this together. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, what you have said is correct. The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised in eloquent transcendental verses by such exalted personalities as Brahma, are very pleasing to great devotees and liberated persons. One who is attached to the nectarian honey of the Lord's lotus feet and whose mind is always absorbed in his glories may sometimes be checked by some impediment, but he still never gives up the exalted position he has acquired. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. We can read passage by passage, probably. Whoever is next.
Sri Shukadeva Goswami accepted both of the king's propositions, that the person who is advanced in Krishna consciousness cannot embrace materialistic life again, and that one who has embraced materialistic life cannot take up Krishna consciousness at any stage of his existence. Although accepting both these statements, Sukadeva Goswami qualified them by saying that a person who has once absorbed his mind in the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may sometimes be influenced by impediments, but he still does not give up his exalted devotional position.
Prabhu, continue reading.
Yes.
According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, there are two kinds of impediments to devotional service. The first one is an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava. This is called Vaishnava Aparad. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warned his devotees not to commit Vaishnava Aparad, which he described as the mad elephant offense. When a mad elephant enters a beautiful garden, it destroys everything, leaving a barren field. Similarly, the power of Vaishnava Aparad is so great that even an advanced devotee becomes almost devoid of his spiritual assets if he commits it. Since Krishna consciousness is eternal, it cannot be destroyed altogether, but advancement may be checked for the time being. Thus, Vaishnava Aparad is one kind of impediment to devotional service. Sometimes, however, the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee desire to impede one's devotional service. For example, Hiranyakashipu or Hiranyaksha were formerly Jaya and Vijaya, the gatekeepers in Vaikuntha. But by the desire of the Lord, they became his enemy for 3 lives. Thus, the desire of the Lord is another kind of impediment. But in both cases, the pure devotee, once advanced in Krishna consciousness cannot be lost. Following the order of his superior, Swayambhuva and Lord Brahma, Priyavrata accepted family life, but this did not mean that he lost his position in devotional service. Krishna consciousness is perfect and eternal, and therefore it cannot be lost under any circumstances. Because the material world is full of obstructions to advancement in Krishna consciousness, there may appear to be many impediments, yet Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, declares in Bhagavad Gita 9.31, Kaunteya Pratijanani na me bhaktya prayashati. Once one has taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, he cannot be lost.
So here now we understand finally that how did Priyavrata ended up doing this, ended up taking up family life. Prabhupada says that even though one is at the epitome of spiritual life, very advanced devotee, there can be 2 types of impediments in a spiritual life. One is Vaishnava Aparad, committing offenses to other devotees, because of which his spiritual life, spiritual practice can be checked. And the other is the desire of Krishna himself. If Krishna wants one to take a certain lower position, to come to this material world from the spiritual world, then that becomes another form of impediment. And so it is not very shocking now that Priyavrata took up family life, because we will see that he was requested to do so by his father Brahma, by his grandfather, Lord Brahma, who is a representative of the Supreme Lord. And so in order to follow the desire of a pure devotee, Brahma, of an authority, even though he did not want to, but Priyavrata still took up family life. And this was the cause. And Prabhupada makes a very interesting, very amazing point in the purport in this passage. He says, whether it is Vaishnava Aparad or whether it is the Lord's desire that makes one come down from his position, Prabhupada says, in both cases, the pure devotee, once advanced in Krishna consciousness, cannot be lost. No impediment can check one's spiritual progress, no matter how bad it is. It can only temporarily check one's practice, one's interest in spiritual life, but it cannot be destroyed. Spiritual progress can never ever be destroyed. And so Parikshit Maharaj is possibly at some relief now that Priyavrata will not sway away from his position. Next passage.
In this verse, the word Shiva Tamam is very significant. Shiva Tamam means the most auspicious. The devotional path is so auspicious that a devotee cannot be lost under any circumstances. This is described in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita by the Lord himself. Partha naiveha namutra vinashas tasya vidyate. My dear Arjuna, for a devotee there is no question of being lost, either in this life or in the next. Bhagavad Gita 6.40. In Bhagavad Gita 6.43, the Lord clearly explains how this is so. Tatra tam buddhi samyogam labate pauradehikam yatate cha tato bhuya samsiddho kurunandana.
By the order of the Lord, a perfect devotee sometimes comes to this material world like an ordinary human being. Because of his previous practice, such a perfect devotee becomes attached to devotional service, apparently without a cause. Despite all kinds of impediments due to surrounding circumstances, he automatically preserves in devotional service and gradually advances until once again he becomes perfect. Bilvamangala Thakur had been an advanced devotee in his previous life, but in his next life he became greatly fallen and was attached to a prostitute. Suddenly, however, his entire behavior was changed by the words of the very prostitute who had become so much attracted to him and became a great devotee. In the lives of exalted devotees, there are many such instances, proving that once one has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, he cannot be lost. Konteya pratijanihi nami bhakta pranashyati. The fact is, however, that one becomes a devotee when he is completely freed from all reactions to sinful life, as Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita. Yesham tva anta gatam papam janamam punya karmamam te dvanda moha nirmuktam bhajante mam drita varata. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and who are freed from the duality of illusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. On the other hand, as Prahlad Maharaj said, Atirna Krishna Paratam Svato va mito vipadyeta griha vratanam. A person who is too attached to materialistic family life, home, family, wife, children, and so on, cannot develop Krishna consciousness. These apparent contradictions are resolved in the life of a devotee by the grace of the Supreme Lord, and therefore a devotee is never bereft of his position on the path of liberation, which is described in this verse as the Shivatamam Padavim. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the sign of advancement. This is the sign of love for the spiritual master, surrender to the spiritual master, that I may not want something, or I may not want to take up some responsibility, or I may feel that this is below my spiritual standards, or this is below, this can draw me down. But if an authority, if my spiritual master wants me to do something, then I do it. That's the that's the sign of advancement. That's the sign of love for the spiritual master, unflinching faith. Concern about one's own interests and inclinations reduce, and there's more surrender, there's more trust in the spiritual master. And so Priyavrata understood that entering family life could be devastating for my spiritual life. I don't need to do that, but Lord Brahma wants me to do that, so I will do it for his pleasure. Verse 6.
Sukadev Goswami continued, "My dear king, Prince Priyavrata was a great devotee because he sought the lotus feet of Narad, his spiritual master, and thus he achieved the highest perfection in transcendental knowledge. With advanced knowledge, he was always engaged in discussing spiritual subjects and did not divert his attention to anything else. The prince's father then asked him to take charge of the ruling of the world. He tried to convince Priyavrata that this was his duty as indicated in the revealed scriptures. Prince Priyavrata, however, was continuously practicing bhakti yoga by constantly remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thus engaging all his senses in the service of the Lord. Therefore, although the order of his father could not be rejected, the prince did not welcome it. Thus he very conscientiously, did somebody help me with this word? Conscientiously raised the question of whether he might be diverted from devotional service by accepting the responsibility of ruling over the world." I'd like to see the Sanskrit on this. Oh my gosh.
This is such a mature position of a devotee. He said he did not welcome it, Priyavrata. He did not want it. He was not happy about it. But for the sake of the world, for the sake of a higher principle, he accepted it. Prabhupada says in the purport to this verse, "This is the symptom of a great liberated devotee. Even though engaged in worldly affairs, he does not take pleasure in them, but remains always absorbed in the Lord's service. While thus serving the Lord, he deals externally with worldly affairs without being affected." It is said that the jiva's position in this material world is like a drop of oil in water. Like oil never mixes in water, it stays afloat. And similarly, a pure devotee should act like that, in the world but not of the world. And this is also, it's amazing, this is how an advanced devotee operates. An advanced devotee does not simply jump at the opportunity of material, ambition, of material growth, material pleasure, wealth, power, influence. If such an opportunity comes in our life, then, an advanced devotee does not simply blindly jump to it, but he considers that, is this going to affect my spiritual life or not? This is the question that they ask, and this is the test that we can also see in our own lives, that any form of material opportunity or material sense enjoyment or any kind of such opportunity takes place or shows up in our life, then how eager are we to take that up? Are we questioning that? Are we prioritizing Krishna consciousness? Do we ask, how is this going to impact my bhakti? That is what Priyavrata was doing. He thought that I'm so satisfied in Krishna consciousness and devotional service. I don't want to take up responsibility of the whole world. I don't want to get married. He was considering his spiritual position. And that is a test that we can apply in our lives. And the difference between a regular congregational devotee and an evolved person is that, a regular devotee constantly has to plug themselves in to find inspiration, to find faith. Because we are generally so detached from Krishna that, our spiritual practice, our day-to-day spiritual activities are like routine, ritualistic activities. Krishna is far away from the center of our lives. It is said that our life should be centered around Krishna, but Krishna is one small part of our life, and then our life is centered around other more important activities like family, like maybe our job, our work, friendships, relationships, so many other things. And that is the difference between an evolved person and a regular practicing new devotee, that an evolved person is able to prioritize Krishna in every single decision, every day's decisions, every day's activities. At every point they ask, how will this affect my Krishna consciousness? Is this beneficial or is this worse for my bhakti? In Mahabharata, we see the story of how before the war, when Arjuna and Duryodhana approached Krishna for help, what did Duryodhana ask for? The army. And what did Arjuna ask for? Krishna. And this is a choice that we have every single day of our life. Maya or Krishna? Do we want Krishna's energies? Do we want Krishna's army? Or do we want Krishna? Every single day we have this choice. Krishna's energies. Do I want to enjoy Krishna's energies? Do I want to be lost in Krishna's energies and Krishna is far away? Or do I want, which is something which is initially more difficult to do, choose Krishna, because Krishna comes with no weapons, Krishna comes with no armies, Krishna does not promise to fight for me. Krishna is just there as a friend, as a guide. But still, do I make that difficult decision to say no to the initial enjoyment that his energy provides, but say yes to Krishna in my life? That is a every day, every second choice that the devotee can make. And so the conclusion of what we discussed is basically not that family life is necessarily an impediment, because we see so many amazing devotees in family life doing their duties expertly and yet so detached, such amazing devotees. So the conclusion is not to hate family life, but the conclusion is that being in that situation or being in any situation, any position in material life, do we choose Krishna? Do we prioritize Krishna? Or is our priority, is our center family, relationships, kids, or is Krishna the center and everything is supporting that, supporting our spiritual life? And so that's why Priyavrata was very hesitant, but he took up the responsibility for a higher cause. And in the next 3 verses, we see how initially, because he was hesitant, his father Swayambhuva Manu requested Brahma to come and talk to him. And so Brahma arrives to discuss the situation with Priyavrata. We will end here. Thank you, devotees, for listening patiently and attentively. And we will now open the floor for discussion. Any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you so much for the really wonderful class. I had a couple of reflections. I just wanted to meditate a bit on what you said about choosing, that Duryodhana chose the army, Arjuna chose Krishna. I mean, I think we've all heard that so many times, but I never made the relationship between we get to choose. Do we choose Krishna or do we choose Maya? I'm just repeating so I can remember, basically. And then another thing I was thinking was sometimes not wanting to be a leader is actually a good quality of a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So like, sometimes we want to be a leader because we want power, or we want to control people, or we want influence, and so sometimes it's actually a good quality. And I heard from Naranjana Maharaj a story he gave in one of his lecture where he had been temple president for a while. He was sannyasi, you know. He had a lot of services, a lot of responsibilities. And then one day, all of the GBC, they had a big meeting, and they invited him to come, and he wasn't in GBC yet. And basically, they wanted to ask him, you know, Maharaj,
would you like to be part of GBC?
Mm.
And his response was no. He's like, you know, I have my preaching, I have my services, my disciples. He didn't have that desire to, like, you know, lead, I guess, or like control people or whatever. I don't know exactly the reason, but basically he said he's like, I'm not interested. And they're like, okay, fine, you know, can you just step out of the room for a little bit, and we'll let you know when you can come back in. So he went out of the room, and then after some time, they invited him to come back into the room. And as soon as he came in, all the GBC members were clapping. They were like, congratulations, you're GBC now. So that was his qualification, was that he didn't have that desire for, like,
Right.
you know, fame or prestige or anything. So
Thanks for sharing. Yes, it is said that who is a perfect leader? One who does not want to lead, one who does not want that position. Thanks for sharing. Yes, Krishna.
I'm curious. This is always an interesting section to read when you're like a brahmachari, you know? You're like, oh, what the heck is it? And it appears to be a little contradictory to what we saw in the last canto, is that King Prachnabarhi, he had so many responsibilities and so many obligations and stuff like that. And he, you know, he kind of left the kingdom in ruins because he left early. And it was kind of emphasized that these responsibilities are a lower principle than his own Krishna consciousness, than his own spiritual life. Also, we see examples like Giriraj Swami. Giriraj Swami came from, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but a very wealthy family, a very like influential family, but still was better for him, you know. And then we're seeing here that it's kind of like the maintenance of the universe is the higher principle, or the service that he would provide is the higher principle than his sensation. So maybe you could clarify a few things.
Yes, it's the Priyavrata did not choose the position because it was important. He knew it was important, but he did not have he was not attached to that. The reason why he chose that was because he was instructed to do so by his spiritual master. So the instruction of the spiritual master ultimately takes the front seat. Because with our own intelligence, we may not understand a higher or lower principle. And that's what's being established here, is following authority, following the spiritual master. For either it's directly Krishna or the representative of Krishna. Because then we see these contradictory stories or these contradictory events where one completely renounced and then one took up that responsibility. But in both cases, they are following authority. They're following what they was instructed. Prachina Bharishad was previously instructed by Narada because Prachina Bharishad was too attached. He was killing animals. He was too attached to sense gratification. And so he was instructed by Narada to, renounce. And his sons were ready, Prachetas. In this case, Priyavrata had a natural qualification of being detached. He was a pure devotee right from the beginning. And so he was more suited to enter that responsibility and still be detached. So for each person, there is a different instruction. And so, it's not about the higher principle, because we may not be able to understand that, but a pure devotee can see which person is suited for which responsibility. Does that make sense? Yes. Ramamrita.
Hare Krishna, very nice class. I've been reflecting on this a lot lately. This like choosing Maya versus Krishna in every moment. I asked a question yesterday, and I'm also just thinking about it now that although as devotees or as practicing sadhakas we understand that material energy cannot give us actual happiness, still we turn to her and we try to squeeze whatever happiness is there, or she places just the perfect thing, like we're not even looking for her, and then she places the perfect thing on our, YouTube recommendations list, and all of a sudden we're just like, I mean, for me, like every once in a while it's like hours just wasted on something that's so brain rotting and pulls me away, my consciousness so far away from Krishna. It's heartbreaking. And so this is a question that I've had, like, because of that for so long. Why does this happen? But yesterday in class that Ajit was giving, in the evening, I had just kind of had this realization, or was it the day before yesterday? I kind of had this realization, and I just went off on a tangent with this analogy of children. There, say there's a child and she has abusive parents. They're horrible to her, and she sees, this is my shelter. This is, these are the people that clothe me, and this must be what love looks like. This abuse, this hatred, this pain. This is what love looks like, because I'm protected here. This is all she knows. She can't. If she tries to go outside of that, then she's in unfamiliar territory. This is what she knows. This is what she's familiar with. This is love. This is how it's supposed to be. So she grows up and she realizes, dang, my parents were not good to me. They were evil and they treated me horribly, but still there's this feeling in her heart that she can't shake, even though logically we understand that that's not working, that relationship is toxic, it doesn't work. But still she has this affection, this just inner feeling of shelter, an inner feeling of, that's what love is. And then in her relationships outside with normal people, with people that do care and that won't abuse her, there's this fear of receiving that same abuse and this confusion when it doesn't come. Like, do they actually love me because they're not treating me horribly like my parents? So we're so confused, is my point. We're so confused in our state of being in the material world and kind of having some understanding that Maya is hurting us. Anyways, it was just, so we have to gradually, like this girl, her friends can gradually show her what real love looks like, and gradually show her what real relationships are supposed to look like, and what real happiness can look like. And this is what association with devotees does, and what chanting the holy name does, is it gradually shows us what real shelter is, and where we can actually put our faith and put our trust and put our love. And eventually our whole paradigm will shift, and we won't have that attachment anymore. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take baby steps, and it's going to take a lot of trust building exercises. We're going to have to test the waters sometimes and make sure and listen to our doubts and assess them. And
Yes, very practical. Thanks for sharing. Yes, Prabhu.
It was a wonderful class. It's a wonderful theme as well. I was just thinking from Krishna's perspective, like in a family, in a smaller unit, the same principle, the head of the family, like father, he's kind of taking the position of being, so to say, God, like the controller. Okay. So father, if you step into the father's shoes, father, let's say he has many children, his concern is about the younger one who is kind of little, what is the word, haywire, off track. So then he's pleased when he sees that the eldest one, the oldest ones, they're trying to take the responsibility and try to take care of the younger ones. So same principle here, at a bigger amplitude, magnitude. he's more concerned about those who are lost in this material world, which is the purpose of this world, why this has been designed to reclaim the fallen conditioned souls and to uplift their consciousness. So he wants in the leadership those who are concerned about the younger ones or those who are at the, so to say, the lower level. And that's how we see if Lord Brahma, which is the topmost position in this world, when there is no qualified person, Krishna himself wants to take that position.
Right.
Right. We also see the principle that yasyaham anugrahanami harishyeta dhanam shani. So yes, there is apparent contradiction, right? Like Drishadamna Prabhu pointed out. Here also, if you see, Krishna says in this verse that I will, if my real blessing or anukampa, what is the word? My compassion.
Mercy.
What is the word?
Anukampa, compassion, mercy.
Yeah. So upon that person, like Prabhupada's own example, right? He takes away everything from that person. He shows his, how do you say, mercy. That is the word I was looking for. He shows his mercy. But if you see, it is also mentioned elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam that he's looking for, qualified people. And when he finds them, he awards them with opulence. Right. And that's how we see in India, most of the business houses, big business houses, they are all traditionally worshipping Radha Krishna. So we see in Bhagavatam it is said, Lord Shiva's worshippers, they are opulent, but then contradiction here is there are big business families who are actually into worshipping Radha Krishna. They have been awarded that position so that they take the responsibility of taking care of the masses. So that's the principle I was focusing on.
Yeah. Very true. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question. If, we can control our choices most of the time in the waking state, all our choices are controllable, but one thing we can't control is our dream state. So if we have a dream that is the opposite from our spiritual advancement, is that our nature coming through, or is that Maya's influence trying to bring us back to material?
Can you repeat that? If we have a dream?
Yes, if you have a dream that is contradictory to spiritual life or your, what you're trying to do in your waking state, is that our nature coming through, or is that Maya trying to influence us?
Yes. At some place, Srila Prabhupada mentions, dreams are products of the subconscious mind. And so we have very deep-rooted conditionings, which we are not consciously aware of. And so even though we may make progress in spiritual life, we may not actively be thinking about those things, but those conditionings are not completely purified yet. And therefore, those deep-rooting conditionings in our consciousness may arise in our dreams in the form of those images, which we are not consciously thinking about, but because it's still there, those subtle desires may still be there, or those conditionings or past experiences, impressions are so strong in the consciousness that it surfaces in a dreaming state. And so it may disturb us. But as a devotee, we take this, even this, as an opportunity to recognize that maybe somewhere in my consciousness, this desire or this impression is existing. And so I must work towards either purifying it, or I must not pay attention to this desire. It is a disturbance. And I must, it encourages a devotee to practice more intensely, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, Rupa.
I've also heard, very nice explanation. I've also heard that dreams can be Krishna's mercy in the sense of acting out our karma in a way that we don't have to do it grossly.
Yes.
So it erases our karma, but we don't have to experience in this physical world. So it's actually can be a nice arrangement by Krishna to help us in our spiritual life.
Dreams are very real. Sometimes when we suffer in dreams, it is as good as actual suffering because the mind is tormented even when we see a horrible nightmare. And I had a recent experience, so I can say the mind is tormented in a horrible dream. And so that also burns our karma because we are suffering in a dreaming state as well. So yes, thank you, Prabhu. All right, it is 8:32, so we will end here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.